The idea of this session is to see how the external tools for Power BI work, the feature external tools. So we will start looking at how the feature has been implemented in Power BI, how you can extend Power BI with your own tool if you want. I will provide you some information, some direction. And then I will show you a number of external tools that are very popular and common, and we will see what are the features available. And then I will be open to your questions. So this is mainly a demo-based session. So the slide is here is just to introduce the session here. And my name is Marco Russo. I work in SQL BI. I basically work with Power BI and also analysis services all day long. I and Alberto Ferrari wrote several books about DAX and data modeling. We have a lot of content and tools on our website, including some tool that I will show you later, so we can go straight to the content. I will use these slides mainly as a recap. And the first thing I want to do is starting with Power BI. Here I have a Power BI file open, and as you see, we have this ribbon here, external tools. So in July 2020, Microsoft released this feature that allows to include additional tools in the ribbon of Power BI. And thanks to a number of techniques that these tools can use, the tool receives some information from Power BI Desktop about the current model that is open. And these additional tools can operate on your model, reading data or manipulating the data model, like we will see Tabular Editor can do. So maybe that you already have seen that, and now I will just show the first tool, which is Analyze in Excel, which is a tool that you can download from sqlbi.com/tools. I think I have the web page here. So these are a few of the tools that we will see, and the first one is this Analyze in Excel. These are not tools that we made. We just have a repository with links to download these tools. But Analyze in Excel is a tool I wrote, which allows me to do this. Now, you already see the result, but let me repeat this. What I have here is a Power BI desktop file. And you probably know that you can publish this Power BI desktop file on powerbi.com. And once the file is published, we can connect to powerbi.com with a browser, and we can click on a menu item, which is Analyze in Excel. When you do that, you receive a local copy of Excel that has a particular connection string that connects your Excel file to Power BI, the dataset that you published on the web. Sometimes, however, it could be useful to connect Excel to the local Power BI desktop data model. And for example, I use this a lot during the development when I'm writing my measures, because sometimes I have calculations I want to test and validate locally. And Excel is a very useful tool because it allows me to copy and paste numbers and compare if the numbers match what I expect, for example. Now, here I have a model that has new returning customers. This is just an example. And you see that here in this model, I have a number of tables, a number of measures that we see here in the fields pane. And what happens if I click Analyze in Excel? When I click Analyze in Excel here, you see that in a few seconds, we see this windows starting Excel. And now I have Excel, it is a new file in Excel with a pivot table connected to my model. Here I see the same measures that I have in the model. So if I include customers, lost customers, new customers, and I include, let me enlarge this because the font is small, so we have to fight a little bit. I go here and I included the calendar year month in the rows. For each month, I see the number of lost customers, new customers, and customers in a few seconds, because the notebook I'm using is particularly slow once I do this presentation. So I wanted to do this, not the calendar year. Now it is faster. Here we go. So you see that for each month, I have the number of customers I had in that month, how many were new, how many were lost customers, and I could probably add the number of returning customers. Similar to what I had in the Power BI model. Now, probably you are aware that when I do this in Excel, what I get is a local connection that is not valid when I save this file and I open this file again. Because what is happening now, if I show you the connection string of this file, so you can understand, and this helps me also to explain what is going on here. When I look at this content here, the connection string that I will show you in a second has a string here in properties. This special string, let's see if I can enlarge the screen a little bit, is a connection string which contains this name and this name. Let me explain what these two arguments are. The initial catalog is like a database name, is a number that is different every time you open Power BI Desktop. And the same here, this local host column, and there is a number. This number changes every time you run Power BI. So if I save this file, I close Power BI, I close Excel, then I open Power BI Desktop again, I open this file again, this connection string will be no longer valid at that point. But even though I cannot preserve this connection string over time, this is still useful because I want, as I said, I want to use Excel to do operation like this. For example, can I check whether the number of customer is equal to this number? So I write here in Excel a formula where I say I want to compute the number of lost customers plus the new customers plus the returning customers, and I get this number. Actually, let me think. New customers, returning customers. Sorry, I had to just do this. The number of new customers and the number of returning customers. So let's say D5 plus E5 minus B5. This number should be 0. I'm checking whether the sum of these two numbers correspond to this one. And this could be something I do to validate my data. If I find some row that has a number that is other than 0, I know that I made some mistake in my calculation, for example. I do this all the time, for example, to validate my data. So first of all, I wanted to provide a reason why I would like to use it. And this is the current version of Analyzing Excel, the external tool that you can download and install. But as you have seen, how does it work? Because we launched Excel. What happened in the middle? Actually, we launched another application that received the arguments from Power BI Desktop, created the connection string that I've shown you now, and started Excel with a file, an empty file with a pivot table. So this is what the hidden program, the hidden tool made for me. Now, any tool, I can execute any other tool. So let me explain why Power BI is showing here 3 tools, which are Analyzing Excel, DAX Studio, and Tabular Editor. Why, if you install Power BI, you don't have any tool at the beginning. What are the changes required to show some tool here? So when I run the setup of these tools, the setup program that installs the program on my machine changes this special directory that I'm gonna highlight now. So there is a special directory here, which is in Program Files, Common Files, MicroShare, Power BI Desktop, External Tools, where you can store JSON files with a particular format that I will show you in a moment. So for example, Analyzing Excel wrote this file, and if I open this file with an editor, even just with Notepad, I don't need to use a complex editor. So let me see, open with, and let's open this with Notepad. I use Notepad just because I want to show you that it is a simple text file. Now, some part of this file is very easy, which is the initial one. So the version, the name, this is the name that has to be displayed here in Power BI Desktop. Then there is a description that is actually not used. Then there is the path, which contains the executable, the name of the executable file that you want to start. And then we have the arguments. The arguments are the parameters, the command line parameters that are passed to the executable. And these parameters can be replaced with the server name and the database name, which are those two numbers, the local host column number and the other long name for the name of the database, that it would be impossible to know if we just launch Analyzing Excel without the collaboration of Power BI Desktop. So Power BI Desktop provides this information to an external tool, enabling the tool to connect to the data model managed by Power BI Desktop. As you see, there is an additional information here, icon data, which is actually the image that you see here. Is in this case an icon, a PNG that shows the picture here. Now, if you create a text file with this format, you define here the path and the name of an executable, which is a tool of your choice. You can launch whatever you want. You can launch a PowerShell script, for example. You want to create a backup. I have seen many different tools on the web created using this technique. And so you can extend this the way you want. And if you invoke a PowerShell script, you could use the two arguments to automate some action towards the server, the data that you have here. This information is not private. I mean, Microsoft documented this feature. So if I go on the web and I search for Microsoft External Tools Power BI, you see that there is a page in the documentation here that explains how this feature works and provides you also additional information, not only about the script that you have to create, the JSON file that you have to create if you want to create your own tool, but also about the features that are supported to manage that. So this is the description of the parameters that are allowed. This is a template of the JSON file that is supported. And here is the name of the directory where you can place these files. The files must have this extension, .pbitool.json. Any other file is ignored. So the file has to be in this directory with this syntax. So if I want to disable, for example, a tool, because I don't want to display a tool, I can just rename the file like I did here, and I can add something so that the name of the file doesn't end with pbitool.json. I can write any other name and it is ignored. Usually you don't have to worry about this if you use an external tool provided with a setup file. But for troubleshooting, knowing where this is placed could be useful. Imagine that you installed an external tool, and for some reason the uninstall doesn't work. You can just go here, remove the file or rename the file, and the external tool will disappear from your Power BI Desktop ribbon. So going back to the slide 1 second, what we have seen so far is that we can use this special folder defining files that have instructions to create additional buttons in the Power BI ribbon. Each button corresponds to an external tool that can receive information about the current database and local instance of the engine that manages the data that you have in Power BI Desktop. And the first example I've shown you is Analyzing Excel, which provides you a way to access your data with Excel with a temporary connection, because we said if you save that file, that Excel file, when you open it, you should manually change the content of the connection string, updating it with the most up-to-date name of the server and the database. Now, in a future version of Analyzing Excel, what I would like to do is actually opening an existing file using the current connection string. So I would like to reuse a file that I already used before, always with my local Power BI desktop file. Because again, when I create my test and then one day I make a change to my measures, I may want to reuse the Excel file I created to validate the numbers, restoring the connection. I don't want to create an Excel file from scratch all the time. So in a future version, we will provide some technique to connect, instead of opening a new file, connecting to an existing file. And this is where I'm evaluating how to create a user interface that makes this as easy as possible. Now, if you look around on the web, you will find several external tools for Power BI Desktop. Those guys at PowerBI.tips, I think, they created a tool that has like a catalog of many external tools, also very small ones. The problem is that the setup file is a few gigabytes, but maybe it's too much. But in general, it's easy to find these tools. I will focus in this session on two very common tools. And the first one is DAX Studio. Then we will see also Tabular Editor. So DAX Studio is a tool that you download from the web. There is a specific website, daxstudio.org, that also contains some documentation, some additional information about the tool. But basically, you can download the file here, you run the installer, and you have the tool available also in Power BI Desktop. What happens when we launch DAX Studio from Power BI Desktop here? Well, the main difference is that DAX Studio, that by default would ask you where do you want to connect, automatically connects to the Power BI Desktop file that we used to launch DAX Studio. So you see that now that I open DAX Studio is already connected to a specific database, which is actually, let me move this window here, which is actually this one. As you see, I have the same table names, the same measure names, and so on. Everything, the metadata is the same. But why should I use DAX Studio? Okay, DAX Studio is a tool that allows me to run a DAX query. And I will show you in a moment that this could be useful to investigate on the performance of a DAX query, for example. Even though I'm not able to write a DAX query, I can still capture a query from Power BI and execute it in DAX Studio. But I think that the first feature I want to show you is this, view metrics. View metrics actually is classified as advanced, but I think it's the easiest feature to use here, because you just click this button, and in a few seconds, you have a description here of the sides of each table you have in the model. You see that for each table, I have a total sides in bytes of the table. And this size is actually split across all the columns of the table itself. Now, this model is not a particular large model, so let me show you the same feature with another model. This is larger, so this is a model that has 12 million rows in one table, 200 megabytes, 300 megabytes of data. So I go in External Tools, I click the Studio, and I click on the View Metrics. So when this arrives, sorry for the delay, my computer is slow today, but here we go. So I click on View Metrics in this model. And what we will see here, let's start from the end. The summary is just the recap of what we have in the model. And in the model, I see that I had 300 megabytes in 10 tables and 143 columns. You also see here the name of the server and the name of the database that are the two information provided to, in this case, DAX Studio. Now I can see how this data is allocated across the tables. You see that the table that is more expensive is sales. Sales is 98% of the entire model. You see the percentage here. But if I drill down this table, you see that I noticed that, wow, there is a single column on line sales key, which is consuming 97 megabytes. which is 1/3 of the entire table. And then there is another column order number that is consuming other 82 megabytes. Now, because Power BI Desktop, or in general Tabular, stores data compressed in memory, column by column, every column can have a different size. And if you want to reduce the consumption, the memory consumption of your model, first of all, you should import only those columns that you actually need. Moreover, a few columns are more expensive than others. The larger the number of unique values, the larger the size of the column, because the compression will be smaller. And for example, in this case, I see that this particular column is a column that has the same number of unique values of the entire table, and is a column that I'm not using. This is like the primary key of the sales table, but I don't use this column in any report, in any relationship, anywhere. So even though this column is probably very important in the relational database in SQL Server, it is not important at all once I'm in a Power BI Desktop. So I could get rid of this column. So let me show you what happens at this point, because so far we have seen this external tools feature working as a one-way tool. I start from Power BI Desktop, I go to DAX Studio. But now that I have DAX Studio open, so you see that I have DAX Studio here, and I have my Power BI Desktop file here. So this column, online sales key, is a column of the table sales. So let me go in sales, and let me select this column, online sales key. You can see here that this column has just numbers, is a unique identifier for each row, but that I know that I'm not using anywhere. So I can just remove this column, delete. I'm sure. Let's move forward. So I'm removing this column from the table. Remember, the database was 300 megabytes. Once I complete this task in a few seconds, now if I go back to DAX Studio, I want to wait that the data is actually refreshed here. It could take a few seconds more, but in a few seconds we should be, I think it is not refreshed in this area. That's the problem. Okay, let's see if now it works. Here we go. Okay, here in sales, you see that in the sales table, my column is no longer here. I go back to DAX Studio now, and I click on View Metrics again, because I didn't refresh automatically the View Metrics. It could be a stressful operation. So we could technically update it on the fly, but it could be stressful for the CPU and the RAM. So now I can go here, and you see that now sales is still the largest table, but now the size of this table is 200 megabytes. The column that I removed disappeared here. And if I go to the summary, I see that now my model is 200 megabytes. So I saved almost 100 megabytes by removing just one column. So usually this demo is what I used to say, look, even though you don't know anything about DAX Studio, but this is a tool that is simple to use and can help you saving a lot of memory, because you can focus just on the columns that are more expensive instead of evaluating column by column which one is important or not. Because actually the more expensive one is not necessarily something that you consider for a removal.
Marco.
Yes.
Marco,
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of lag on the audio, so maybe if you can disconnect the video, it may help on the audio connection.
So sorry, you say
we have a lot of lag. Okay. We have a lot of lag on your audio when you speak. Sometimes you get mumbled, and I'm wondering if you disable your camera and just keep the screen share. Maybe it's gonna help.
Okay, you're right. Okay, so let's do this. So I go here. Sorry, I go here. So now you see only the screen sharing, right? And I go back to the camera later. Make sense?
See. Yeah, I mean, so far, yeah, now we see you. Hopefully that's going to help. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. Okay, so, okay. So let me go back to, the slide. So, oh, no, sorry. So this is the first feature of DAX Studio, but actually another reason why DAX Studio is useful is to do this. I show you another feature that is very, very useful in DAX Studio, even though you don't know how to do many, many things in DAX. Let's say that I have in this report here, I have some slow visual, or I want to investigate on the behavior of some measure. You see that here I have this sales amount in a top 10 customers. So if I go here in Performance Analyzer is a tool which enables the analysis of the performance required to populate each visual that you have in the model. So if I refresh the visual here, I can see the timing for each visual. But what is more important, I can copy the query that has been used to populate this visual. Every visual in Power BI generates a DAX query that is executed by the engine and returns the value that are displayed in the visual. The visual itself doesn't know DAX. The visual itself just make a request to the Power BI engine. The Power BI engine generates the DAX query and retrieve the data and provide the data to the visual. Now, what is this DAX query? I can show you. If I copy this query in the clipboard and I go back to DAX Studio here, I can paste the query in DAX Studio and I can just run the query. You see that I click run and I can see here, let me just copy this, okay. You can see here the result of the query, which in this case is a table that has 3 columns, the name, the sales amount, and another column that is has a special name. In this case, the special name is ground total row total, and it is either true or false. This additional column is used in Power BI Desktop to display the number as the number in the rows or as the number in the grand total. You see the grand total is bold and has a different representation. But once I have this query here, what I can do is, first of all, I can check the result of the DAX query, so the content that you see here. But we can also connect to these tools, Query Plan and Server Timings, to run the same query, capturing performance metrics that are displayed in these 2 additional panes, Query Plan and Server Timing. So what happens if I click Run Now? The query plan shows something that usually is not very useful because it is very verbose and it's very complex to understand what is happening here. Whereas the server timings is actually much easier to understand because it provides you the total execution time and other metrics that help you understanding how the DAX code has been executed. And if you have a performance issue in one area of your DAX measures or another. Of course, this requires knowing DAX, knowing how to optimize DAX code, how to read these metrics. But the alternative to DAX Studio is something that is way more complex, because in order to get these numbers, which are the starting point for your analysis, the numbers that you see in this pane, you should spend minutes to collect data from SQL Server Profiler, moving this data in some Excel file, doing some calculation just to retrieve, oh, this is the total amount for the formula engine, this is the total amount for the storage engine. So it could be time consuming. Now, the query that you see here is generated automatically by Power BI Desktop, but another thing you can do in DAX Studio is just run a query, which could be a simple query like evaluate product. I can type the name of the table, and this is like a select star from table. You can run this and you can see the result. Now the performance is not important, but I want to see the result here. Now the result you see here is something that you can also copy to a file. And so if I run this query again, I receive a request, where do I want to store this file, export data in CTEM. And now I exported the entire content of a table in an external file. This export feature is so important for many users that we actually have an export data feature, which allows you to choose whether you want to export to a CSV file or to a SQL tables. Imagine that you have some data in a Power BI file, you want to copy them, the content of a table into a SQL Server table, you can do this too. So this is another example why this, because exporting data from Power BI sometimes is not that easy. And finally, we have a real query builder. So evaluate the table name is just give me the content of the entire table, but let's say that I want to create a query where I want to show for each country and each product category here, I want to show the sales amount, but I want to filter my data by, I don't know, I put the country, I could include the continent here, and the continent should be North America. Let's try Europe, because I'm not sure about how we wrote to North America, but this is just an example. I can run the query. Maybe this time I want to show the query here. I run the query again. And I have an error, sorry. Let's see what I did. Query batch completed list, it's not a row set. Come on, why? Let me see, edit query. So it should work. Here we go. I don't know, probably I clicked it somewhere. So you see that I can obtain the result I expected. So only the countries that are included in Europe, and I see the sales amount by category and country. This could be useful if you want to use paginated reports. Paginated reports allow you to write a DAX query connected to a dataset that you published on Power BI, and you can create your own paginated report with, pixel perfect format, and you can control multiple pages. When you have a long list, you want to produce a PDF, for example, or an Excel file, paginated reports is the right thing to use. And even though you don't have a very good knowledge of DAX, this tool could help you to create the DAX query that you need for paginated reports. This is another example of the many things that you can do with DAX Studio. So DAX Studio is a tool that helps you accessing the data that you have in your Power BI model, extracting data, testing DAX measures, writing queries. So these are the 3-4 features, and also analyzing how the data is distributed in your model with the view metrics that we have seen before. These are the main features of DAX Studio that can be useful in your day-by-day work. The last tool that I want to introduce is Tabular Editor. So while DAX Studio is something that we use to, to access the data and do something, with Tabular Editor, we want to manipulate the model. So let's take a look at this. Let's go to my model here. Now I'm using the model that is smaller, the one that has new returning customers, because here I have more measures. I want to show you what happens when we have several measures in the model. And let's say that I want to, when I'm here, I want to do a small change in one of these measures, because I want to show you that I will make a change later using the tool. So you see that now the code here is properly formatted, but now I make some change and I remove the code formatting. So I write everything in a single line here, because what I want to do, I want to apply changes outside of Power BI Desktop that will be applied to this model. So now I just save this measure. I didn't change the measure for real, I just changed the format, but this is enough to see whether I can modify the model or not. So if I go in External Tool and I click on Tabular Editor, I open a window. Tabular Editor is another tool that I can download and install. And this tool enables me to edit the Power BI model. Now, if you remember, I've shown you a web page that I show you again. I want to show this again because it is important to realize that when we use Tabular Editor, only a few features are supported for the changes over the data model. And the features that are supported are changing or adding or removing measures, modifying calculation groups, modifying perspectives. So we can manipulate the model, adding, removing, changing measures, calculation groups, and perspectives. Now, measures are available also in Power BI, whereas calculation groups and perspectives are not available in Power BI when you design the model, but they can be consumed in a Power BI report. And these features are supported by Microsoft. It is just that Power BI Desktop today doesn't have a user interface to enable you to create a new calculation group or a new perspective. So let's go to the Tabular Editor now. So this is the reason this warning is saying, be careful, if you change something else, you could create problems to your model. So handle with care. Now, while I'm here, you see that the model is represented in a way a tabular model is represented in the tabular engine, which is the engine used by Power BI. We have a list of the tables. In each table, we have columns and measures. You see that the columns are represented with this icon, and the measures are represented with this icon. Now, when I click on sales amount, I see here the DAX code for sales amount. And the same happens for every measure. Now, I can enlarge the font a little bit here. And I want to explain here now, let me see if I can enlarge this window. You see that I have the script of the measure, and if you remember, this is the measure I modified when I was in Power BI Desktop. And I removed the formatting for this first part of the measure, and I wrote everything on a single line. What can I do at this point? Well, one thing I can do here, you see that there is a button here, Format DAX, which is an integration of Tabular Editor with DAX Formatter. So if I click here, the measure is modified and is formatted according to the features in DAX Formatter. So at this point, I have my code formatted in a certain way. So let's say that I want to format it with a short line. So I see something that is very different from what I had before. Now you see that here, I can accept changes or I can cancel changes. Let me zoom this a little bit. Cancel, accept. Let's say that I accept the changes. If I accept the changes, you see that here in Lost Customers, I have this icon. So what is happening? Tabular Editor accesses the data model of Power BI, but it works on a local copy of the model definition. We don't have the data here. We just have the structure of the model, the tables, the columns, the relationships, the measures. We don't have any data here. We don't see the content of the tables. And now this copy is no longer synchronized with Power BI Desktop, which means that if I want to confirm these changes for my Power BI Desktop model, so you see that this is my Power BI Desktop measure here, the lost customers measure is still this one. But if I go here in this menu, and I go here and I say File, Save, this way, now the changes I applied, you see that the change here disappeared. And when I go back here, this changed automatically. So what happened is that the changes I applied to my local copy of the data in Tabular Editor have been wrote in a single operation to Power BI Desktop. So at this point, you might say, Marco, we could have made these changes in this formula editor. You're right. For one measure, you're right. But when you have many measures in your model, the productivity of being able to quickly move between different measures without waiting not even a second when you make a change here, because all the changes will be committed in a single operation to Power BI. When you completed your changes here in Tabular Editor, when you have a large model with many measures, you save a lot of time, because Power BI has to validate all the measures of the model every time you modify a single measure. So if you have to change 10 measures, at the end of the edit of each measure, you probably have to wait 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds sometime when you have a large model. When you have a small model, this is not an issue, I know. But when you have a large model with many measures, this starts to be something that is not really productive. And so this is the first reason why I love Tabular Editor. It allows me to apply multiple changes all at once. Not to mention that I can also make these changes in the additional properties of the measures. Display folder, format string, many other properties that sometime in Power BI are scattered across different parts of the UI. Yes, I know, Power BI is improving this. Over time, it will improve. But again, sometimes it is just easier and more effective to do all the changes at once here. Moreover, Tabular Editor has a scripting ability. So you can create scripts in C#, and if you don't know C#, you can just use something that is predefined here. And so, for example, this is a small loop that I could use to iterate over all the columns and apply a change to properties of the model. So if you want to create small macros to apply changes to all the measures, you want to change the format to all the measures that have a certain name, you want to rename all the measures, you can do many things using this scripting ability that you have in Tabular Editor, and much more. If you go to this website, tabulareditor.com, you can find some documentation about all the features of Tabular Editor. And I also suggest you to go to YouTube. There are several videos recorded by the author of Tabular Editor, Daniel Okiter, who lives in Denmark. And he has really a lot of content that is very helpful. Also, if you want to implement systems where you track the differences between different versions of the model, and you want to also implement a continuous development, continuous integration pipeline for the model that you want to deploy on a large server or Power BI Premium, for example. These are other options you have. So the tools that you have seen are available in this single page that has links to guide you to the other tools. There are also the tools I didn't display today, but they are listed in the page. But you can find also many other tools if you move to, if you just look on Google or something like that. So
Marco,
yes.
This is great info. Thank you so much for presenting tonight.
Yes.
You know, we've moved our because of your availability tonight. We've moved our meeting to middle of the day. And
yes.
Very good attendance, and thanks everyone for attending. And looking forward to seeing you again in the near future.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
I see. Thank you, guys. I'm just looking at whether there are questions. The recording will be available. Just checking the questions here. I see that analyzing Excel is the same. There is an interesting question about analyzing Excel that I had seen here. Analyzing Excel is not the same as using analyzing Excel from Power BI Service. The analyzing Excel from Power BI Service enables you to connect Excel to Power BI Service. But if you want to work locally, because if you had to wait, imagine that you create some metric, some measure in Power BI, and you want to test how it works in Excel, because in Excel you can do some other calculation, you can validate the numbers of your model. What you have to do is publish the model on powerbi.com, wait a few seconds, if not a minute or two, then connect with Analyze in Excel, then test everything, then you realize, oh, I have to fix another measure, and you repeat this again and again and again. During the development, it will be useful to connect to your local Power BI desktop file. And I agree that when you are in production is a different story. I use this as a tool during the development, not to provide this to the users in production, of course. Okay. Okay, I don't see other questions, so great. Okay. Can we use DAX Studio for analysis? Of course, DAX Studio can be used for analysis services and Power BI Premium. Power BI is actually, DAX Studio was designed for analysis services. So DAX Studio is for analysis services, and we can use it also on Power BI desktop, yes. Okay. Thank you very much. See you, I hope, soon in San Francisco. Hopefully in 2021, not in 2022. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark.